take the baton. Shannon.
You know what? We can weigh in with you on that Supreme Court pick, too. We'll discuss, Laura. In the meantime, here's what's ahead on Fox News at Night. Tonight, in the wake of the New York terror attack, President Trump slams Washington.
And we have to get much less politically correct.
Reaction from top Republicans and Democrats to the president's challenge after the rampage. Senator Mitch McConnell warms to the president on terror policy and judicial appointments, but there's no thaw when it comes to Steve Bannon.
The person you mentioned and his allies succeeded in nominating 5 candidates who all lost.
Can the majority leader heal the split within the GOP? It's a Fox News at Night exclusive. And should Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman John Podesta worry about special counsel Robert Mueller's probe into Russian collusion? Judicial Watch's Tom Fitton weighs in. Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. New developments tonight surrounding yesterday's deadly attack on a bike path in New York. The suspect, Sayfullo Saipov, appeared in court today, charged with providing material support to the Islamic State and more. Eric Shawn is live outside Bellevue Hospital in New York, where many of the injured are now facing long, grueling recoveries. Good evening, Eric.
Good evening, Shannon. Today, U.S. Attorney June Kim earlier this evening told us that, yes, Saipov can be tried as an enemy combatant. That, yes, Saipov can be sent to Gitmo, as President Trump has suggested, and so to the White House, but it's up to his superiors. Meanwhile, he remains in federal custody, we believe, on the prison floor of Bellevue Hospital, which is here behind me. And we are told he remains unrepentant tonight and defiant. Court papers saying that he wants to hang the ISIS flag in his hospital room, and that he also is glad and happy that he killed 8 innocent people. We got our first look at Saipov earlier this evening when he was sent from here down to the criminal court building, the federal court building on Pearl Street, when he appeared before a federal magistrate. It only lasted for about 10 minutes. Saipov was in a wheelchair. He was wearing sweatpants. He looked kind of disheveled and slumped. His feet were shackled and he had handcuffs on. He had a little earpiece in his ear in which the proceedings were translated by a Russian translator. But in English, he did say thank you. He was charged with material support to a foreign terrorist organization and destruction of motor vehicles. Authorities say that Saipov planned this terrorist attack for 2 months, that he rented a similar pickup truck from Home Depot last Sunday to practice driving it, that on his cell phone they found about 90 ISIS videos and nearly 4,000 pictures of ISIS atrocities, that in the pickup truck there was literature written in English and in Arabic praising ISIS. There were knives as well as a stun gun. And June Kim, as I told you, when I asked him if he could be tried as an enemy combatant and potentially sent to Gitmo, the U.S. attorney said, yes, that is possible, but that's above his pay grade, he said, but that decision could be made, that there has been similar precedents in the past where someone was charged with a federal crime and then considered an enemy combatant. We're also learning more tonight about the victims in this horror. Nicholas Cleaves was only 23 years old. Nicholas lived near the site of the attack. He graduated from Skidmore College in the class of 2016 just last year. He worked for his parents' website designer. And then there also is Darren Drake. Darren was 32 years old, a financial analyst at Moody's. He lived in New Milford, New Jersey with his parents. He had dinner every single night with his parents, his father Jim, saying that this is like 9/11 all over again, and that they knew something was terribly wrong when their son did not come home last night. Also, there is the victim from Belgium, the woman. Her name is Anne-Laurie Decant. She is 31 years old. She was here with her mother and 2 sisters. She leaves a 3-year-old and a 3-month-old son. Her husband, in a statement, said she is a fantastic wife and a beautiful mom, and the loss is unbearable. Also, there were 5 Argentines from the city of Rosario in Argentina. They were on those bikes and walking on that bike path. They were here for a 30th anniversary of their high school in Rosario. There are tonight 9 victims still in the hospitals, and earlier today, the New York Cardinal, Timothy Dolan, visited them, and he said New York's love them, as we do all. Here is the Cardinal leaving the hospital earlier this afternoon.
Welcome back.
I just tell them I love them and that the whole city of New York is embracing them with their love and prayers, and we're on our knees for them and with them. So, and that's a great consolation, because not only is their physical pain bad enough, but the thought that they're by themselves and away from home this city has made them feel at home.
As you heard, he says God loves them, so do we all. He did not visit Saipov. Saipov, prosecutors say, by the way, Shannon, could potentially get the death penalty, or waiting, though, for his indictments, which have not yet come. We're live tonight at Bellevue Hospital in New York. Back to you, Shannon, in Washington.
And we'll have more on that conversation about whether to classify him as an enemy combatant. Eric Shawn, live there in New York for us. Thank you very much. And this just in, new video showing NYPD cops apprehending the suspected terrorist. This is taken from high above in an apartment. It's done by cell phone. It shows Saipov running away and cops closing in before they jumped on top of the suspect. You can hear the gunfire. It's chilling. Also tonight, Saipov's public defender says it's important to let the judicial process play out. Attorney David Patton says, quote, how we as a society treat Mr. Saipov will say more about us than it will about him. It's not surprising it took no time at all for the New York tragedy to turn political, with rhetoric from both parties and from both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue. Our chief national correspondent, Ed Henry, has the very latest. He joins us now live tonight. Good to see you, Ed.
Good to see you, Shannon. Republicans were all over Hillary Clinton for focusing on gun control after the Las Vegas massacre. Now the shoe is on the other foot. Democrats expressing outrage tonight that the president is pushing extreme vetting immediately after this terror attack. Remember, after tweeting last night that he was ordering the Homeland Security Department to step up scrutiny of refugees, today at a meeting with his cabinet, the president vowed to shut down what is called the Diversity Visa Lottery Program. The terror suspect in this case entered the U.S., as you heard, from Uzbekistan during the Obama administration under this program. It's been in place for over 20 years. It provides visas for people from parts of the world that have small numbers of immigrants here in America. The idea of diversity driving this program has led the president to charge it's all about political correctness. The president also jumping on the fact that as a House member in 1990, now Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer introduced the bill that helped create this program. The president tweeting, quote, the terrorists came into our country through what is called the Diversity Visa Lottery Program, a Chuck Schumer beauty. I want merit-based. Schumer says he tried and failed to shut it down, that program, in 2013, and he charged the president is now politicizing this.
We have to get much smarter, and we have to get much less politically correct. We're so politically correct that we're afraid to do anything.
The contrast between President Bush's actions after 9/11 and President Trump's actions this morning could not be starker.
Now, Republican Lindsey Graham declared tonight the president made a grave mistake by not declaring the terror suspect an enemy combatant held at a military base so that the U.S. could gather more intel, while Democrats like Adam Schiff say he should be tried in a civilian court, which, as you heard from Eric Shawn, is what the U.S. Attorney in New York is planning to do, though that U.S. Attorney left the door open on the possibility of changing that down the road. And the president was blunt about all this today, calling the suspect a, quote, animal who could be shipped to Gitmo at any time. Shannon?
All right, Ed, thank you so much. And of course, this conversation provokes all kinds of interesting issues. Joining us tonight from both sides of the aisle, Republican Senator James Lankford from Oklahoma and Democratic Representative Eric Swalwell from California. Now, both of them sit on the intelligence committees in their respective bodies on Capitol Hill. Great to have you both here tonight.
Thanks for having me with you.
Okay, so let's talk first about this idea of him being classified as an enemy combatant. It was something that the president said he was open to today. Sarah Sanders in the briefing said she was open to it as well, but we get the indictment now. He's been Mirandized. That's not likely to happen at this point. Senator Lindsey Graham, who floated that idea with us last night here on Fox News at Night, said today the Trump administration missed an important opportunity to send a strong message to terrorists and make America safer. This is a huge mistake. Very sad. Start with you, Senator. What do you think?
I think he could be tried here in the United States. Obviously, the crime was committed here on our property in the United States. It was clearly a murder trial. There is terrorism connection to that. I think we can pull that out through our traditional court system. The reason to be able to move him to Gitmo is if he's connected to a larger network, and we want to be able to engage on that larger network size. We don't know that at this point. It looks like he was radicalized online. It might have been through some others. We should ask those questions and find out. I think that's why the U.S. Attorney is kind of holding back to say we could do that. If we find out more that he's connected to a larger network, then we move him off.
Congressman, what about you? Because, you know, when you look at this, there are things that can happen as an enemy combatant. You can have more time to question this individual. You may get more intelligence from them. I think that's Senator Graham's frustration.
I say let him face 12 New Yorkers. I trust the American juror. I was a prosecutor before coming to Congress, and, you know, I still believe that the American criminal justice system is the best in the world. And, you know, let him spend the rest of his life in jail, and I think show the world that we have faith in our own system.
And he's potentially, with these charges, I understand, potentially facing the death penalty as well. So we'll see, and we do expect there could be more charges to come. Meantime, it provokes this conversation about the diversity visas and whether that's the way that he came in, and what it says about tightening these issues. I know you all probably have differing views on vetting, how we're doing with that. But when I talked to folks on the Hill today about this idea of rolling back diversity visas, it was something the Gang of Eight tried. That Senate bill passed. It died in the House. So where do you two stand on that and getting rid of that particular issue? More than 1 million people have come to the U.S. under that diversity visa system.
Sure, and the 1990 law that was referenced was actually supported by Newt Gingrich and Mitch McConnell, a guest that you'll have later tonight. I support comprehensive immigration reform, which would expand H-1B visas, worker visas, agricultural visas, and also reform family visas. And it got rid of the diversity visa. I think of course we want to, when an attack like this happens, we want to look at where the individuals come from, what their family connections were, if they were still in connection with somebody who is talking to terrorists abroad. But I trust Homeland Security and the vetting they're doing, and a lot of the evidence suggests that he became radicalized years after he came over here, and that's the hardest person to detect.
What about that? What about our vetting process? Could it be, listen, the president again tweeting tonight just before the show saying we're going to ramp up extreme vetting. It's a phrase he likes to use. What do you make of what we're doing now?
Well, the vetting that we do now is a year or a year and a half long process. So you don't just get the visa lottery, as it's often called, and then you're here the very next day. So you may be selected to be able to come to the United States and be able to get a green card and become naturalized, but it's not an immediate process. There still is a vetting. The question is, on the vetting for these individuals, do we know positive information about them? Often our vetting is done just based on the negative. Are they on the terror watch list? Do we know of any criminal background? If we don't, then they're assumed to be okay. So we don't get the positive side. I think that's really where the extreme vetting goes, is to be able to ask, do we know positive information about them rather than just a lack of negative? This visa lottery system, this diversity program that's out there, is designed for small countries all around the world, so our nation will be more diverse. I would tell you, our nation was a very diverse nation before 1990. I'd like to see our immigration move to where they're actually bringing something to the United States we need, whether it's a stonemason that's needed in an area or whether it's a computer engineer that's needed in an area. If they're bringing a skill that the United States need, I think that should be a higher priority than just saying we want to open up 50,000 individuals to become American citizens that don't necessarily bring a certain skill to us.
Many of these changes that we're talking about would have to be part of immigration reform. And Senator, I got to be honest with you, there's a lot of split within the GOP. That's no secret that even trying to get to the same page on that within the party is going to be difficult, much less coming up with something bipartisan. I mean, when I think about issues like E-Verify, we talked about that a little bit last night on the show. A lot of people think that it's a common sense measure, and yet it doesn't seem to have full support. Republicans seem to be split on a lot of these key issues.
There are some splits and some divisions. There are some areas of unity as well. What's interesting to me on E-Verify, no one has the problem with the I-9 form. Everyone in every job in America fills out a W-2 and an I-9 form. That I-9 form is to verify their status. But what it doesn't do is really take the next step and tell the employer whether that's actually the person that's looking at you with false documents or real documents. So there's no reason we can't combine the I-9 and the E-Verify together into one step rather than to have two steps on that.
I think we have an opportunity, as we head into the end of the year and some of these decisions that we have to make to find bipartisan support on the DREAM Act. The president, told...
Is it possible?
Well, he told Leader Pelosi and Schumer that he would sign it, and so I hope we can.
But then he put out a list of like 70 things that would have to go along with the DREAM Act.
And there is, and what the president's talked about, and I have a bill called the Succeed Act that tries to deal with what it was been the DREAM Act for a while. The DREAM Act, of course, has been around 15 years. It's been tried 3 different times, and it's failed every time, including when Democrats had the House, the Senate, and the White House. They couldn't even pass the DREAM Act. We're looking at a more conservative version of that to say, what do you do with those kids that are in DACA? But the president's been very clear that when we do something legislatively to be able to solve the issue of those kids that are in DACA, which is a very difficult situation for them, we need to also do border security. We also need to handle the rest of what we're doing in immigration. Not a giant comprehensive bill that includes everything in the world, but you should do border security. That is an area where we have common agreement on how are we going to actually keep the nation safe. Let's find those areas of common ground. Let's pass those and move forward.
Well, I have both of you because you're both on the intelligence committees in the Senate and the House. I want to ask you about where we're proceeding on the Russia investigations because we have indictments from the special counsel this week. That seems like it's far from over. Let me ask you first in the House, how are you proceeding? Are you confident that you're going to get the answers the American people deserve?
I thought both Senate and the House had a productive hearing today. We learned that, we still don't know the full extent to how the Russians weaponized social media, but that there was an acknowledgement by the social media companies who testified that there is a duty going forward to warn law enforcement if they see an attack underway. So I hope we can build off of that, for more bipartisan findings and reach a conclusion.
Yeah, I think we can get to a conclusion. We work very hard to keep this nonpartisan as we work through it, as much as Washington, D.C. can do anything nonpartisan. We try to be able to walk slowly together on it, but we're trying to evaluate how did classified information get into the public eye? Did any American try to cooperate with the Russians to try to interfere with our election? And then also this whole conversation about social media and online. How did they do it? What did they do? And how do we respond? We have elections coming up as soon as next week in Virginia, but then a whole series of elections happening next year as well. But this is not just about elections. One of the things that came out of the testimony today is the Russians and their engagement in social media last year during election year, only 9% of what they did was election related. The rest of it was social areas where they're trying to take both sides of every argument, elevate the volume, whether it was immigration, whether it's Black Lives Matter, and whether it's on the NFL that's happening right now. All those areas they're engaging with. They're not starting the argument, but when they find an area where Americans are arguing, they're trying to amp up the volume.
Gasoline on the fire, something that should concern us across all party lines.
And unity, I think, is the best antidote.
It is. We need to work on that.
Yeah.
And look, we have you here tonight
Yeah.
together. So Congressman Swalwell, Senator Langford, great to have both of you.
My pleasure.
Thanks for joining the conversation. All right, we're going to have much more on the fallout from the New York terror attack coming up, including an unexpected effect on the increasingly nasty Virginia governor's race. Stick around. In addition to calling on Homeland Security to step up, quote, extreme vetting, President Trump also seeming to open up a legal theory that Senator Lindsey Graham first floated right here last night on Fox News at Night.
I hope President Trump will break the cycle of turning the war into a crime by declaring this guy a suspected enemy combatant.
That could mean sending the suspect to Gitmo. So is the president accurately assessing how the American people feel about this issue? Because he seems open to that idea. Politics editor Chris Steiwalt is here to discuss it all and break it down and make sense of it for us.
What up, dog?
It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Okay, so let's start with this idea of sending this guy off to Gitmo. The president said today he was open to it. Sarah Sanders said the same thing in the briefing. And then they charged him in New York.
Right.
And they read him his Miranda rights and all that kind of thing. Not that they couldn't do it now. It's going to be a lot trickier if they decide to.
Well, as it turns out, he is a citizen, right? Is he a citizen or is he?
He has a legal permanent status, is my understanding.
So he's basically
not a citizen. No.
But he's a permanent legal resident of the United States.
As far as I understand, yeah.
And you're the lawyer here. I'm the political hack.
We love your hackery.
You're the lawyer. He's entitled to all the rights in the Constitution, right?
Yes. Well, no, I would say not all of them, but he is potentially still getting a one-way ticket to Gitmo. That is a possibility, even though all these other things have happened to him legally. It's possible.
Can you do it to a full American citizen?
I think that we had one, Jose Padilla. At one point he was called an enemy combatant. I think he went to Gitmo. He might have escaped.
So I guess my point here is what's popular is great, and the president certainly there's nothing that he could do to this guy if he said I want to feed him to sharks. That the people would go, you get 70%, and the people would be like, yeah, sharks are fine, whatever. That's why we have a Constitution, though, and that's why we have lawyers, and that's why we have courts, and that's why we have this stuff to determine what are the rights of this person. So in this case, what's popular isn't what it's not about what's popular, it's about what the law is and what's practical.
Okay, so let's talk about this. The last polling we have on Gitmo is February because it has not been in the headlines, but this is what we have from our polling back in February. 55% said keep it open, keep sending people there.
Sure.
21% said move these guys to federal prisons. 17% said that send them out of other countries. But we know what happens sometimes when you do that. You don't always keep track of them. And then 7% said don't know. Now, for all of these ideas, not surprising, the ACLU, not a big fan. Here's what they had to say today. The president's call for more extreme vetting and an end to the diversity visa program, which will unfairly target Muslim and African immigrants, will double down on his Muslim ban and anti-immigrant policies. Sending Saipov, that's the suspect from yesterday, to Guantanamo or treating him as an enemy combatant would violate due process and the rule of law. They went on to say it's a shame that Trump is using this attack as a platform for pushing his anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim agenda. Something tells me the president's not too worried about the ACLU.
Well, yeah, there's that. And then because obviously again, sharks, not sharks, so the team shark will save most voters. What's interesting there, though, is it's the immigration issue that will actually be more politically roiling here, because the president, if there's one thing he's talked about from the beginning, the vetting is extreme, super extreme, triple extreme, every superlative that he can muster, he will apply to this concept about vetting. This diversity you saw in the political firestorm that whipped up immediately, because for a minute it looked like, is the president blaming Chuck Schumer? What's going on here? The discussion about immigration is about to get a lot sharper as a consequence of this discussion, because when Democrats say, or the ACLU says, you're being unkind with your vetting, if the president can say, well, if we would have vetted this guy differently, maybe we could have prevented these murders, these deaths, then his ball is squarely on his side of the field.
And quickly, I want to touch on, we've talked about this ad in the Virginia governor's race, that it's really disturbing. It doesn't matter what party you are. I mean, to have a truck chasing around small children in a very menacing way. We're showing a little bit of it. And then the close-up on it says Ed Gillespie bumper sticker on the back, as if he is, flying the rebel flag and chasing after these innocent kids. The group that put that out had to pull it today, because that's exactly what happened yesterday, and people were actually killed. Even before that, a lot of people thought it was over the line, including some Democrats.
Right, and this has already turned into a Virginia, which has a history of nice elections, or relatively nice elections, this has turned into a real garbage election, and the issues and the conversation, let's put it this way. On election night 2018, a year from now, I'm afraid that we'll probably be talking about ads like this and worse, because the political climate, the atmosphere, the amount of hatred, invective that's out there is so intense. It's so over the top. And people have decided they can say any disgusting thing about their political rivals, because if it works, then who cares?
Yeah, and the thing is, as much as people say they hate negative ads, we always see that the polling actually, in the most cases, it actually works. So people may say they don't like it, but they respond to it.
It does work, but I would just say this. Not negative advertising works too. Yeah. There are different ways that you can succeed and run for office. You don't have to be a creep.
Yeah, and this ad did not come directly from the Northam campaign,
no.
But it may not serve them well. So we will see.
Backfire.
Okay, good to see you.
Okay, happy Wednesday.
Chris Starwell, thanks for being here. Is it Wednesday already?
It's happening.
All right, new information from the House Intelligence Committee today, showing that shady social media ads paid for by the Russians may have been aimed at more than dividing Americans during the 2016 presidential election, rather than just supporting a single candidate or taking sides. House Republicans released a slew of examples of divisive ads paid for in Russian rubles after 2 days of hearings with Facebook, Google, and Twitter executives. The ads ran the gamut of divisive social issues, from a group called South United, which declared the South will rise again, to an account called Blacktivist. Thousands of protesters were drawn, by the way, to Trump Tower last November, partly thanks to an account paid for and created by Moscow called Black Matters USA. Next, a Fox News at Night exclusive. The Senate Majority Leader talks judges, whether Mueller should be fired, how he feels about Steve Bannon and those primary challenge threats, and of course, tax reform. Taxes also on the table this year. Did they get done before the end of the year? Am I going to be hanging out with you Christmas week as we have the boat at the cliff for this?
You might be.
President Trump is praising the GOP's work getting his judicial nominees onto the federal bench. In tweets tonight, the president says, quote, thanks to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and the Senate GOP, we are appointing high-quality federal district and appeals court judges at a record clip. Our courts are rapidly changing for the better. The tweets followed today's confirmation of Michigan Supreme Court Justice Joan Larson. She's a former law clerk to the late Justice Antonin Scalia and was on the president's initial short list of 21 possible picks to the Supreme Court. She'll now be a federal appeals court judge, just one level below the Supreme Court. Also approved for the federal bench is Amy Coney Barrett, who withstood Democratic concerns about her actually believing and practicing her Catholic faith.
You are controversial. You have a long history of believing that your religious beliefs should prevail.
She said they would not influence her decisions from the bench. Well, those judges would not have moved forward without pressure from Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. I talked with him about those Senate fights today, along with the president's call for Congress to step up and pass measures aimed at preventing terror attacks like the one in New York. I asked the Senate's top Republican how he plans to make that happen and whether it will all be part of a broader immigration reform package, an issue that's actually divided many within the GOP.
The president has basically challenged us to do something on the DACA issue, and that would provide an opportunity to revisit some of these other issues that I think he's been advocating that make sense. He's already engaged in more extreme vetting. I think we ought to try to move towards some kind of merit-based immigration system.
The president wants to see the diversity visa issue unwound. We don't know about the terror suspect out of New York. There are reports that that's how he came to the country. It raises these questions now about reforming that program. Can you separate it out as a single issue? Does it need to be part of a bigger immigration reform package?
Clearly, the legal immigration part of our immigration system could be improved and should be improved. And I think the President's decision on the Deferred Action for Children Arrival, the DACA proposal, provides an opportunity sometime between now and March to not only pass that, but to pass other things that improve the legal immigration system. And this incident in New York further underscores the need to do that.
Judicial nominations, because that is a big issue for you. Word today that the ABA is now rating some of the president's nominees as not qualified. Does that strike you as an accurate assessment of their abilities? Do you think it's more political in nature?
Oh, it's purely political. The ABA has become kind of a left-wing organization dominated by liberal lawyers. At least some of our Democrat colleagues seem to take the point of view that if you're a devout, in this case, Catholic, that somehow you would not be able to follow the law, which is really, I think it's important to remind everybody, we don't have a religious test in this country. It's right in the Constitution. So the good news is the President's making spectacular appointments to these circuit courts. We're confirming them rapidly. We're transforming the third branch, the judiciary, in a way that will reach far into the future because these nominees are young and they believe, as Justice Gorsuch said when he was in my state last month, judges don't wear red and they don't wear blue, they wear black. And those are the kind of people the President's sending up.
You know that terrifies your critics, and I hear from a lot of them, I'm sure you do too. A left-leaning coalition is now pushing back because of the indictments that came on Monday, saying this: the idea that Trump, whose top aides are under federal indictment by the Justice Department for conspiring against our nation, should be able to appoint lifetime judges who will have huge influence over this nation for generations to come is beyond outrageous and defies common sense, and they're calling on you to stop all nominations and confirmations.
That's an absurd argument. The President was duly elected. He has full authority to make these appointments, and the fact that some of these people have been indicted is completely irrelevant. The judicial system and the special counsel will do whatever they're going to do, but it has no relevance whatsoever to the President exercising his full power to make judicial appointments and for the Senate to confirm them.
Let's get back to Mueller and these indictments this week. There have been some calls, primarily from Steve Bannon, saying that the GOP shouldn't be helping or cooperating with this. He's calling for them to cut off funding. There are suggestions that he's asking the White House to slow walk documents.
Well, all I hear from the White House is that they're cooperating fully with the investigation. And the President, in the end, makes that call himself. The various outsiders will express their opinion one way or the other, but all indications I've seen is the White House view is we're fully cooperative.
And on Steve Bannon, obviously, let me ask you, what do you make of this suggestion that his very vigorous, aggressive challenges or suggestion of challenges in the primaries have caused the resignations or retirements of Jeff Flake and Bob Corker and others potentially considering? Is that a factor? What do you make of this kind of inter-party dispute over these primary challenges?
It's been around for a while. I mean, back in 2010 and 2012, the person you mentioned and his allies succeeded in nominating 5 candidates who all lost. So we succeeded in 2014 and 2016 in defeating sure losers in primaries, and we took the Senate and kept the Senate for another 2 years. So we'll be involved in primaries where it's necessary in order to get people nominated who can actually win in November.
Taxes also on the table this year. Did they get done before the end of the year? Am I going to be hanging out with you Christmas week as we have the boat at the cliff for this?
You might be, but our goal is to finish this year. That would be actually a remarkable accomplishment. The key to this will be Republican unity. We want to reduce the incentive to go offshore and provide significant middle-class tax relief. That's what this is about.
Well, it is back to court tomorrow for 2 former Trump campaign officials implicated in the Russia probe. But what about the Democrats, who may also be in Robert Mueller's crosshairs? More on the Podesta brothers up next. Welcome back. This is a Fox News alert. President Trump just tweeting out important information minutes ago, saying this: tomorrow, I will be announcing the new head of the Fed. I think you will be extremely proud by this person. Tomorrow, big news. Well, Trump is tapping Fed official Jerome Bell, we understand, to succeed Federal Reserve Chairwoman Janet Yellen to run our nation's central bank. Traders say Bell is the boring choice, but the best one for market stability. We're going to see what happens when the market opens and we know more officially. Well, this week's indictment of two former Trump campaign officials caught up in the probe regarding Russian interference in the election is raising concerns within both Republican and Democratic political circles. Kristen Fisher joins us tonight with the very latest developments. Good evening, Kristen.
Hey, Shannon, let's start with the Republicans, because tomorrow Paul Manafort and Rick Gates will be back in court to discuss the conditions of their bail. You know, they've been under house arrest ever since turning themselves in on Monday after the judge sided with the special counsel and agreed that the two men posed a serious flight risk. At the same time, the special counsel is continuing to work his way closer and closer to the president's inner circle. Sources familiar with the situation confirmed to Fox that Mueller's team is scheduled to meet with White House Communications Director Hope Hicks in mid-November, right after the president's trip to Asia. They're also expected to interview a handful of other current administration officials as early as this week. Now, even though the White House is distancing itself from Manafort, Gates, and George Papadopoulos, it's standing by another former campaign official, Sam Clovis, who's currently the president's pick to be the Department of Agriculture's chief scientist. But now he's in some hot water after his attorney confirmed that he is the campaign supervisor Papadopoulos was referring to in these court documents. When Papadopoulos emailed, quote, to arrange a meeting between us and the Russian leadership, the campaign supervisor, or Clovis, responded that he would work it through the campaign, but that no commitment should be made at that point. The campaign supervisor added, great work. But keep in mind, it's not just Republicans in the Trump administration that's worried about where this investigation may go. Democrats are too, especially the Podesta brothers. John Podesta, of course, he was Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman, while his brother, Tony, is a well-known lobbyist here in Washington who just stepped down from the firm with his name on it after it was implicated in Manafort's indictment. Turns out the Podesta Group is being investigated for its work lobbying lawmakers on behalf of the Ukrainian government after it was hired to do so by Manafort back in 2012. Now, so far, no charges have been filed against Podesta or the Podesta Group, but the news is still sending shockwaves throughout lobbying firms up and down K Street. Shannon.
It is. All right, Kristen Fisher, thank you very much. Joining me now with more on the Russia probe, Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch, a conservative watchdog group that has filed a lawsuit seeking greater transparency in Robert Mueller's ongoing investigation. Tom, good to see you tonight.
Hey, thanks for having me, Shannon.
Let's talk a little bit more about the Podesta brothers. We know more about John. The general public does because of his role with Hillary Clinton. But tell us about Tony and why it's significant that he stepped away from his firm.
Well, Tony Podesta is just a well-known lobbyist here in Washington, D.C., and a real hired by everyone to get everything done. And evidently he was tied to the Manafort effort, and Manafort's been indicted for his efforts on behalf of foreign entities. And the question is the Podesta lobbying operation next? Now, Tony says that I filed all the forms properly, I filed the legal advice, and I didn't do anything wrong. But I think the concern from fair-minded people is why the inordinate focus on Trump campaign associate collusion or activities, and why not similar focus on the activities of Tony Podesta, and frankly, more importantly, John Podesta, who had a business relationship with the Russian government, and not only that, was the head of the Clinton campaign that paid for the dossier, which was essentially a collusion with the Russian intelligence operations.
Though, at this point, that there is some focus on at least one of the Podesta brothers has come within the crosshairs, the interest of the special counsel. So I know that you think you've got a lot of problems with Mueller and his ability to be objective, but if he were to indict one of these brothers, would that change your opinion? Should it?
Well, I don't know. My concern is that we don't know what Mueller is supposed to be doing. He indicted Manafort on charges unrelated to what he was hired to do.
But you know special prosecutors, I mean, they have a very wide berth and a lot of money and unlimited time to do this stuff.
Well, that's the constitutional problem. You know, Mr. Mueller was hired to investigate collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, or Russian involvement in the 2016 election. The Manafort indictment really has nothing to do with that. It's tax fraud, money laundering, mortgage fraud. We don't need a special prosecutor for that. And the question is he only going to investigate collusion between the Trump campaign, allegedly, and the Russians, or is he going to involve the Clintons in it?
Do you trust him to follow the facts? Because there are a lot of folks on both sides of the aisle who say, I think he will go after Democrats if he finds that there's a legitimate reason to, that they've broken the law in some way. There are a lot of folks on the Hill. We had Senator Lindsey Graham here last night. He said there will be, quote, holy hell to pay if the president gets rid of Mueller or if he isn't cooperated with in some way.
You know, there's a difference between getting rid of Mueller and questioning his constitutional authority under the law. That doesn't mean you're not cooperating with a special prosecutor. It just means you're asserting your rights under law. And Mr. Mueller is not being supervised properly by the Justice Department. He has seemingly a wide-ranging charge without adequate supervision. We've asked for his budget. We haven't been able to get it. We had to sue in court for his budget. But why the big secrecy? Shannon, you've covered the Justice Department. Are you aware of any Justice Department investigation in recent memory that had 20 prosecutors assigned to it? It just doesn't happen. You know, my guess is the terrorist operation, anti-terrorist operation right now in response to yesterday's attack might have similar numbers. But this is a mini Justice Department being run by Mr. Mueller, and people who are appointed by the president and subjected to Senate confirmation aren't supervising him properly and adequately. Well, for him to make this big first indictment, not about the price of tea in China, but about something really minor, relatively speaking, tells us that he has an overly wide view of his abilities.
Well, I mean, what he charged them with yesterday, no collusion with Russia and the campaign. I mean, there was nothing in that. People immediately hear an indictment, and those on the left get really excited, like, aha, there's proof. That's not what these indictments were about, to be clear. But we also got on the same day this plea deal with George Papadopoulos, who, that was a much different situation. That was that he was reaching out, trying to facilitate something. At least some say that he overestimated his ability to do so and was maybe exaggerating his ability to get top Russian officials to the table. But it sounds like in these emails that's absolutely what he was trying to do. So we get word of that, a deal that a man who'd been arrested back in July, we don't hear about it until the same day we get the indictments on Manafort and Gates. Do you think that the special counsel's office is sending a message saying, yes, we got these indictments on these two and there's no direct collusion as part of these indictments, but here's Papadopoulos. We're very much still on the scent of this trail.
Well, you know, unfortunately for Mr. Papadopoulos, he evidently lied about something that wasn't illegal, which were communications with these Russian operatives talking about the campaign that didn't go anywhere. And all the evidence in the indictment or in the plea deal suggests that it didn't go anywhere. The campaign was monitoring what he was doing, and basically it never rose above his own machinations individually. So I don't see what the big deal is there. And there's nothing that's been released publicly thus far showing there's been any collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians in an improper way.
Yeah,
and the only information we have is between the Clinton operation and the Russians, where monies were exchanged. And you know, my question is the FBI using this dossier, and now Mr. Mueller using this dossier, and is it fruit of the poison tree?
Yeah, and are you confident, and we got to go, but are you confident that the House, the investigations they've launched into both Fusion GPS and the dirty dossier and also the Uranium One deal, that will get answers that the American people want?
No, I'm not confident, because the agencies are protecting Mueller's investigation, and anyone who asks questions about anything are being told, oh, we're looking at it criminally, so therefore you can't get the information. So we'll be in the dark unless we push harder on it.
Well, we know you do. So keep us updated on what you find.
Will. Thank
you. Good to see you. All right, up next, it is night court. First, the left wanted gun control. Now they want bat control. We'll explain in just a minute. Time now for Night Court. We pass no judgment on these stories, but present them to you, the jury, for your consideration. California always looking for a way to stay ahead of the curve, and like other West Coast cities, Los Angeles is justifiably worried about riotous violence. But with guns already tightly controlled, at least legally, LA is coming up with a novel idea to keep the protesters and rioters at bay. They've just made it illegal to go to a demonstration with more than a dozen items. Now that includes baseball bats, stun guns, glass bottles, signs that are not made out of a soft material, I'm not sure how that works, swords, torches, bricks, metal pipes, and the list goes on. Now it's up to law enforcement to figure out how to prevent all that from hitting the streets. Former President Obama once said that large-scale voter fraud is, quote, fake news, but reports of voter fraud continue to trickle in, including 4 election workers who were just charged in Philadelphia for allegedly violating state law during a March special election. Democrat easily won. The GOP and Green candidates filed a joint civil lawsuit in federal court. All 4 election workers who were charged are registered Democrats who manned ballot boxes. And white men need not apply. That's the message from a Democratic National Committee data services manager currently on the hunt to fill multiple vacancies in the tech department. Though her email says that the DNC is looking for a staff of diverse voices and life experiences, it apparently doesn't mean white men. DNC's data service manager, Madeline Leader, reportedly wrote in an email, "I personally would prefer that you not forward to cisgender straight white males as they are already in the majority." We'll stick around for new developments on the New York terror investigation. We'll wrap it up for you next. We are minutes away from midnight here on the East Coast, 9 p.m. out on the West. By the way, breaking news update, the Astros have just won the World Series. And by the way, we also just got a new video of the suspected terrorist, Safullah Saipov, being chased by a bystander yesterday, moments after he allegedly mowed down bicyclists and pedestrians on New York's West Side Highway. Tonight, Saipov's public defender says it is important to let the judicial process play out. Attorney David Patton says, quote, "How we as a society treat Mr. Saipov will say more about us than it will about him." And by the way, not long ago, the president tweeted late tonight saying that tomorrow he will officially name the new head of the Fed. So watch for that. Our news kicks off again at 4 a.m. East. Most watched, most trusted, and most grateful that you spent the evening with us. Good night from Washington. I'm Shannon Bream on Fox News at Night.